Please be seated. Good morning. We're back on the record. State of Florida versus George Zimmerman, case number 12 CF 1083A. Mr. Zimmerman, if I could just have a moment to ask you some questions about the jury selection or the jury process yesterday. Again, yesterday you had the opportunity to review the questionnaires with your attorneys for the new group of people?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and did you have an opportunity to discuss with your attorneys how you felt about the responses to those questionnaires?
Yes, Your Honor.
Right, and you were here listening to each one of the people being individually questioned about them?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and your attorneys made some decisions about some potential jurors. Did they discuss those with you?
Yes, Your Honor.
And are you satisfied with those decisions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You can be seated.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're waiting on some jurors to be brought up here. Counsel had indicated that when we got to 30, you would like to begin with the jury selection. So our court deputy has worked very hard to try to make a configuration here of 3 rows of 10. So I'd ask if you would just look at that to see if that, when we get to that part, if that would suffice. Is that a yes?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And he's also been so kind to draw up jury sheets that would accommodate those 30. So if you want some of these, he will make you copies for both sides.
We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anybody here yet? Is there anything else that we need to take up while we're waiting on the jurors, potential jurors?
Not from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay, then we'll just sit and relax until they get here. Okay, thank you.
E as in echo, 7-3 is present.
Good morning. Please be seated. You're now going to be referred to as E73, and the attorneys are going to ask you some questions about the questionnaire you filled out on Monday, and we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. Mr. De La Ronda, you may proceed.
Good morning, ma'am. Again, I'm referred to you as E73. My name is Bernie Del Rio, and I'm with the State Attorney's Office. I'm going to be asking you a series of questions based on the questionnaire you gave already that you filled out. First, let me talk about the publicity aspect of it. You filled out in terms of what you remember hearing about the case or reading about it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can I ask you what your source of information was in obtaining the information that you wrote here? Was it TV, newspaper, internet, other source?
Probably mostly television and the newspapers.
Okay. Let's focus first on the TV. Was it local or national news or both?
It was both.
Okay. The local news, do you recall what channel you would have listened to?
I most frequently watch Channel 2 and 6.
And then how about the national news?
NBC.
NBC? Okay. In terms of the information that you learned about this case based on the media, was it at the time it happened back in February of 2012? And what I'm trying to ask you, was it at that time only, or did it continue up to now?
No, it continues
Okay.
throughout.
So you remember hearing about it or reading about it back in February of 2012?
I do.
Okay. You also mentioned newspaper. Did I take that to mean more than one newspaper or just the Orlando Sentinel?
Mostly the Orlando Sentinel.
Okay. Any other newspaper you think?
I can't remember the name of it, the one that comes out of Daytona.
Okay, okay. And were the newspapers like a hard copy, or was that on the internet?
Not on the
Okay.
I don't read newspapers on the internet.
Okay. Did you do any or come across any stories on the internet, either by way of Google, Facebook, Twitter, whatever other media sources you could have used?
No, I don't think so.
Do you do any of that stuff at all, Twitter?
I don't do Twitter. I am pretty computer savvy. I do a lot of email for work and things, but I really don't have time to search the web for things.
And the reason I ask is sometimes on Facebook and stuff like that, news pops up, and so it may have popped up about this case. You don't recall that at all?
No.
Okay. What were your first impressions when you first heard about the case back in February of 2012? Would that have been on TV first and then the newspaper, or vice versa?
Probably on television
Okay.
first.
Did you have any first impressions when you first heard about the case?
I do a lot in the city of Sanford, and I thought, oh no, this didn't really need to happen in Sanford.
When you say you do a lot, you're talking about through your occupation or volunteer work?
No,
or-
volunteer work.
Okay. What kind of volunteer work do you do in the city?
I was on the St. John River Festival of the Arts and worked with the theater.
Okay, so
And the
you're
Welcome
intimately
Center.
involved in the city aspect of it, or, okay. You were not familiar, or were you familiar with where this happened specifically?
I was not at the time, but I am now.
Okay, based on the news reports, you know where it is. Had you ever been there before, or to the place that happened? That
No.
area? Okay. All right, let's focus then in terms of the TV. You would have heard something on TV, and then you said, oh, Sanford, or whatever you said earlier. Is that correct? Those are your first impressions?
Right.
Okay. And then when you have kept up with it every time, what I'm trying to find out from you, are you a regular, like 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. TV watcher, or do you just periodically watch the news?
We watch the news most evenings.
Okay, all right. And do you read the newspaper every morning too?
Not every morning. I get the newspaper from Wednesday to Sunday.
Okay, but you do read it on those days? Okay, or not catch up, I guess, on the weekend? Is that correct? Okay.
My Sunday paper is still in the package, but
Okay. Okay.
not that great.
Sure. And then you said you kept up with the case from the beginning until now?
By kept up with it, I don't mean that I did a lot of research or read everything I could about it. You just knew that it was going on in the background.
Right. Sometimes when we read the newspaper or when we see something on TV, we see the headline and we know what's going on.
Right.
My question of you is, how in depth did you get? Did you actually read, the whole story, or just kind of glossed over it?
I think in the beginning I probably read the whole story, but then afterwards,
It kind of, you knew what. Okay.
knew what had happened.
Sure. Did you keep up with any of the court proceedings in terms of what happened in court? Motions or hearings in front of the judge or rulings by the judge, anything like that?
Not really.
Okay. Do you recall at this time any court proceeding that you may have watched on TV, even if it was just, a 30-second soundbite?
I watch Law and Order, but
We're going to get to that in the second stage when we ask you questions. We're focusing right now just on the publicity. And what I'm
you mean
asking
like
you is whatever.
any trial?
Yeah, no, I apologize. I'm talking about this case.
This trial?
I apologize. I was not clear in my question. I'm talking about just focusing right now on the state of Florida versus George Zimmerman, and obviously
Okay.
okay.
No.
So you did not keep up or watch, as you can recall, any proceeding that you're aware of?
No.
Okay. Do you recall any photographs that you would have seen on TV or in the newspaper about this case? And when I'm asking you, I'm only focusing on this case, no other cases.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Which photographs do you recall?
I recall a photograph of Mr. Zimmerman with a bloodied face.
Okay. Any other one?
I recall several photographs of Trayvon Martin.
Okay. And you recall which ones of Trayvon Martin you were?
There were several different ones at different stages of his life.
Oh, okay. Okay, I follow what you're saying. Anything else? Any other photographs you recall?
I think a photograph near must have been at the crime scene.
How about any videos? Do you recall watching any videos that may have been played on TV, or I guess if you go
Yeah, in
outside?
association with the news, I remember that there were videos.
Okay. Do you recall anything about them themselves?
Not clearly.
Okay. And again, this is just what you recall. If you don't remember something, it's perfectly all right to say, I don't remember it. You saw the photographs. What were your impressions regarding the photographs when you saw them? Let's talk about Zimmerman first, and then Trayvon Martin.
I guess my overall impression was that this is going to be a very, very tough concept for everyone.
A very tough concept.
Concept, for everyone.
Okay. And when you say concept, what do you mean?
Someone who is unarmed being shot by someone who is armed.
Okay. I gather you kind of getting to this in a backwards way, probably. In your question here, you put that you had not formed an opinion. Is that correct? Is that still true?
It is.
Okay, all right. And you believe in terms of our legal system that we ask jurors to come and whatever they've heard or seen on TV, read in the newspaper, they have to disregard that in terms of not factoring in and making a decision. Could you abide by that?
I believe I can.
Okay. And did I understand you to say you didn't do any follow-up just because you live in Sanford, like what's going on?
I don't live in Sanford.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry, I apologize. Live in Seminole County but are active in Sanford, I apologize. Did you do any follow-up in terms of what was going on in the community or anything like that? Do you recall any about that?
By follow-up, I'm not sure what you mean. I can tell you that it certainly had an effect on the downtown activities.
Sure. And the reason I asked you...
It's lessened now, but
Yes.
it's had an initial effect on things like Alive After 5 and things like that.
And the reason I asked you is you mentioned you were involved. Would that have any impact? Go ahead and take a drink.
Thank you.
Would that have any impact in being able to arrive at a decision in this case?
No, I don't think so.
In the media, in terms of TV or what you read in the newspaper, do you recall hearing or seeing something in terms of the commentators? And what I'm trying to distinguish is sometimes there's the news, you know, it used to be just straight news, person does this, and then there's people commenting about the news.
The difference between watching Fox and CNN.
Yes. Okay. Do you recall any commentary about the case that you may have been privy to?
Probably not verbatim, but I know the
Sure.
ilk,
Do you recall who you would have heard commenting about the case? And I'm talking both at maybe a national level or at a local level, you know, attorneys, other people talking about the case or giving their opinions about the case or having press conferences about it. Do you recall any of that stuff?
I do.
Okay. Who comes to mind when I ask you that question?
Al Sharpton.
Okay. All right. And how did you feel about that?
I think I felt that there probably were not the racial overtones in the actual event that the national media seemed to want to make because of Sanford's past.
Okay.
So I think a little bit was misplaced.
So you felt it was unfair in terms of how Sanford was being portrayed in the national media? Would that be fair?
I did.
Okay. Would that have any impact in you being able to sit as a juror?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Do you recall any news conference involving Trayvon Martin's parents or anybody on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman?
I remember his parents speaking on TV. I remember the, I don't want to say demonstrations, but marches that they had. I remember Mr. Zimmerman's appeal for funds on the internet.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zimmerman.
He was asking for people to donate money
Okay.
for his defense cause. I remember buzz about that on the
Okay.
television. But
Did any of that, you know, we're all absorbing that, and you were obviously, did any of that kind of stick into your mind in terms of, you know, that's not right, or, you know, you didn't like that happening? Or what I'm trying to ask is, would it have an impact on you being able to sit as a juror?
I don't believe it would have an impact. I have seen many instances where the press seemed to sway things.
So you're of the opinion, as probably a lot of Americans, that sometimes the press goes to one favors one side versus the other?
Absolutely.
Okay. In this particular case, which, and I guess maybe we got to ask, which press are you listening to? Was it Fox or was it?
No.
And my question is, did you feel they were slanting at things one way or the other?
Sometimes I felt that way.
Okay. In which way did you feel they were slanting it? Assuming it was only one way, it may have been, you know, depending on that day.
I felt heavily that it looked more to be a racial issue as opposed to a personal thing that happened in an area that may or may not have had any race relations associated with it.
So you felt the media was trying to bring race into it when it should not have?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Would you hold that against Mr. Zimmerman in this case?
No,
Would you hold that against the state of Florida? We're prosecuting Mr. Zimmerman. Would you hold that?
no, no,
So
No.
you would not, that would not factor in any way?
no.
Okay. The other thing that's important is when you picked as a juror, you didn't take another drink.
Here, I'm gonna get a tissue.
You didn't take a break, or you're all right? The other thing that we ask jurors is, obviously, everybody comes in, you know, you get a lot of information, especially if you're active in the community or you watch TV. And you sit as jurors, you're picked as a juror. You're asked to disregard that, you tell us, yes, I have not formed that opinion, I can disregard all that news. But you're listening to the evidence, you're listening to a witness, and I'm going to use an example that is not applicable in this case. A witness, for instance, could say, there was a red car, right? And you're going, okay, that witness said that, but I seem to recall on TV that the car was blue. And my question is, do you understand under the law what you saw on TV, you have to disregard? Even though it's going to pop in your mind while you're listening to the evidence, and you know, your mind's going to start going, hold on, is the car blue or red? You have to rely on what the witness says about that. Can you do that?
I believe I can.
Okay, in other words, if something pops in your mind that you remember reading about or seeing on TV, can you completely disregard that, even though it will pop in your mind, because we're all humans? You can do that?
I believe so.
Okay. In terms of the commentary, do you recall any other commentary other than Mr. Sharpton that you mentioned? Any other commentary that comes to mind? Any other person commenting
Not
about
any
the case?
specific individual.
Okay. Any attorneys commenting about the case or giving their opinions, or just talking about the case? Do you recall any of that?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, they may have been a part of a newscast at
But-
the time, but I don't remember anything specific that someone had said about the
And
case.
so if that were to have occurred, whoever did it, it would not have had a lasting impression on you, I gather?
Obviously, it didn't.
Okay, all right, okay. You have on your notes in terms of what you recall, I know you were trying to summarize it, I guess, that George Zimmerman shot and killed Trayvon Martin. George was a neighborhood watch patrolling a neighborhood. Trayvon was visiting from Miami. After some interaction, a fight ensued. Zimmerman stated he shot Martin in self-defense. Is that what you basically remember about the case?
Yes.
In terms of combining everything you've seen on TV and, okay. Do you remember anything else about that? And what I'm saying is, in terms of visiting from Miami, do you remember anything other than he was visiting from Miami?
I think he was visiting his aunt.
Okay. Anything else in terms of after some interaction, a fight ensued? Any other facts about that that you recall?
No, not really. Yeah, that he was wearing a hoodie.
Okay.
That got
okay.
pretty famous.
Okay. Did you place any significance on the fact that he was wearing a hoodie?
I have an 18-year-old who lives in one. No.
I'm sorry, you have an 18?
I have an 18-year-old who lives in a hoodie. And no, I didn't place any
Okay.
significance on it.
The fact that you have an 18-year-old that lives in a hoodie, would that impact you one way or the other in this case?
No.
Okay. You also said that Zimmerman stated he shot Martin in self-defense. Anything else you can recall about that in terms of what Mr. Zimmerman said or didn't say? Let's focus on what you remember him saying on the news or what was portrayed on the news. No?
No.
Okay. And I think you've notated here also that in terms of the question about whether you had a hardship or conflict, you do not. Is that correct? I know, everybody has a conflict at their work or other stuff. I'm talking about that it would not be an undue burden on you. You would agree to comply. Is that correct?
I think I would change my answer if we had to, if the jury were sequestered. Then I believe it would be real difficult. Got two kids and.
Without identifying specifically where you work and all that, or what part of town you live in, or what part of the county you live in, or naming your kids, you feel that your kids, how old are your kids?
15 and 18.
Okay. And we realize, and I know the court at some later stage may ask more questions about that, or we may inquire at a later stage about this, and we realize everybody that comes to serve as jurors, you know, people don't get overly excited. Most people, when they get that summons, and most people realize that, you know, it's our obligation. I would say make sure to serve your country in time of war. It's one of the biggest obligations we have as citizens. And, you know, so we realize that it's a burden, but you believe that it may be a bigger burden because of if the court were to decide, and the court has not decided that in terms of whether you were sequestered or not.
It would, if it was sequestered, it would be very difficult.
Okay. Is it something that would be insurmountable, I think is the word that the court used, or maybe that I'm using now? An insurmountable hardship. It's a hardship for anybody, obviously.
I guess it's just harder with 2 kids and 3 dogs. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. One thing I neglected to ask you, because we focus on the media, have you heard from any coworkers and or family about the case, that they give you their opinions about the case in terms of what they thought? Let's break it down if we could. Let's talk about people at work. Anybody give you their opinions? Oh, this is what really this case, I have the insight, this is what I know, or anything like that?
I work for a company. I work with a company from New Zealand. They know very little.
Okay.
Probably never would have come up.
Okay, all right. How about just friends? You know, people in the community that you associate with, that kind of stuff. You mentioned you were a volunteer. I'm assuming at some point people express their opinions about the case, one way or the other.
I have friends with lots of different opinions.
Okay.
And they're allowed to have them.
Sure. We all live in this great country and everybody's entitled
That's
to an
right.
opinion. So you've got a variety of opinions from both favoring Trayvon Martin or the state of Florida and then favoring Mr. Zimmerman, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does various views impact you one way or the other? I'm assuming by your answer that it, and your questionnaire did not.
Yeah.
You were able to disregard that. How about with family? In terms of your kids or other family members, did they express opinions to you about what they had seen in the media in terms of the impact it could have or not have on you?
Not really.
Okay. You're able to put them in a separate compartment that has nothing to do with this case. Is that correct? Okay. So the bottom line is you can abide by the court's instructions, admonitions in terms of making your decision only on what happens in this courtroom when all sides are present. That is when the defendant, his attorneys, state of Florida, and obviously the court is present, the judge. You can agree to rely only on the evidence that happens in this courtroom that you hear or see, and obviously the law, and then your God-given common sense. You can do all that.
I can.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. I lost it. It's Mr. West. Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Don West. I'm an attorney on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman along with Mark O'Mara. Rather than repeat questions that have already been asked, I think I'll try to bounce around a little bit maybe for some clarification. So if I lose track or if you're not quite sure what I'm getting at, feel free to ask me to say something more clear. Okay. We're not looking for anything more than just how you feel, just honest answers about how you feel. Let me find out just a little bit more. You mentioned that you work in connection with a company in New Zealand
Yes,
and as a consultant. Do you work out of your home?
I do.
And are you working full-time?
No.
Approximately how many hours a week?
It truly varies. Last week it was all week. So sometimes it's pretty intense and sometimes not so much.
Does your opportunity to watch the news or be involved in current events vary depending on how much you're working at any given moment?
Absolutely.
Over the last 14, 15 months or so, since February of 2012, have you had periods where you didn't pay much attention at all to the news and other times when you became more involved?
Yes.
Anything stick out in your mind about when those periods might have been?
No, not really.
When this event occurred in late February of last year, for the next couple of months, were you paying pretty close attention to what was in the media about it?
I wouldn't say I paid particularly, any particular attention to it, any more than I would anything else that happened in the news.
Okay, so explain a little bit more, if you would, then, your work in the city of Sanford and how you were concerned that this case might be disruptive in some way.
We are just starting an art show in the city of Sanford called the St. John's River Festival of the Arts. It's now 2 years old, so it was our first year. And we were trying to attract people to come into the city and have a wonderful art show that had a lot of demonstrations and stuff. And we're concerned with anything that would impede traffic into the city. So, we didn't really want anybody to be afraid to go to Sanford, for example. It certainly would have impacted the art show. Happy to say it did not.
When was the art show?
It was in June of 2011, and then again in 2012, and again this year. So it was
The show that you're talking,
Yeah.
This was the second year for it, so.
This year was the second year.
So
it was our first
Oh,
year.
that was
Yeah.
the very first one
Yeah.
in June.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your involvement in that organization that puts it on?
I'm no longer involved in that organization. I had some life events that kind of made me not do that anymore.
Anything about this case and the publicity from it and the events surrounding it that played any part in that?
No. My brother was diagnosed with brain cancer, and I became a caregiver for him. And I now have his children, so I was just real busy.
I'm sorry, it sounds like he may have passed.
I'm sorry, he did.
Yes. The 18-year-old and the 15-year-old that you mentioned are his children?
They are.
And how long have you been their caregiver now?
A little over 2 years.
Do you have other children?
I do not.
There are some lessons then. Were you aware of of some of the demonstrations or rallies that took place in Sanford?
Yes.
Did that in and of itself factor into your concern how that might impact on the art festival?
Oh, sure.
Did you attend any of the events?
No.
After I was getting at whether you were paying particular attention to this case in the context of the art festival. And while I think you said you weren't paying particular attention to the case because of the case, but you were wondering if it was going to affect what your plans were for the art festival.
Correct. I really like the city of Sanford.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to see any negative publicity surrounding it.
You made the comment that you think maybe, you mentioned Al Sharpton in particular, may have drawn attention to Sanford because of its past rather than because of the case itself. Would you expand on that just a little bit? And the context is whether or not you think race may have played some part in this case, as opposed to its Sanford's past?
I didn't really think that race had, certainly there is a racial element to the case, there's two different races involved, but I didn't think that that was the reason that something happened. It seemed to be the reason that the press came out in force. And given Sanford's history, it seemed like it was more press than the actual incident would have caused.
Was there anything you heard about the facts of the case? And I know facts are sort of in quotations when you're getting it from a media that has an interest in getting out something quickly.
Right.
Anything about the facts of the case as you understand them that make you think George Zimmerman did anything in this case because of race?
There was an initial news report, and I can't remember whether it was television or not, something about the 911 call where the media made it sound like he said it was made him sound like he said something that was racial when he was just answering, when it seemed like when you listened to the whole thing, he was just answering a question. I don't know if that's pretty clear.
Well, if I understand what I think you're getting to, there was a call that Mr. Zimmerman made to the Sanford Police Department, or to the non-emergency number, and that was recorded, and that had been released to the public at some point. Did you ever hear that call?
Yes.
If it's the same call we're both talking about, there was a section of that where people speculated whether Mr. Zimmerman was using a racial epithet.
Right.
And is that what you're referring
Yes.
to? And how did you feel about that and the way that was handled?
It seemed like perhaps his words had been twisted or sound-bited to say something that he hadn't really said.
Are you satisfied that he did not make a racial-based comment on that recording?
I think I would have to hear it again before I made that comment. I don't recall the entire set. I just remember that I think somebody from one of the networks got fired as a result of slanting the news. But it's not crystal clear in my head. It's not something that I studied.
There were a couple of aspects of that particular recording in the news. One of them had to do with a word that was that some people said he used, that in and of itself was a racial epithet, a racial slur. How a word was said, what word in fact it was. And then there was a separate issue in the news around this same call that had to do with...
I would object at this point in terms of Mr. West testifying about facts unless this witness has knowledge of it.
Okay. I think I'd rather steer it towards the witness telling us what she remembers and then commenting on how that affects her ability to sit as a juror in this case.
Okay, certainly. Ma'am, the first part that I was talking about, you did hear something about that in the news?
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear anything in the news where one of the media outlets may have edited or altered a recording?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember the racial epithet that some people attributed to George Zimmerman on the recording?
I do not.
Is NBC your primary source of national news?
Yes.
Do you remember anything in the news about NBC itself being involved in any controversy surrounding this case?
I don't remember which network had people that were involved in it.
You had mentioned some people got fired.
I think I remember that someone got fired in association with slanting the news, and I probably remember it because I had been in Arizona with these two children, and a senator had gotten shot, Gabrielle Gifford,
Yes.
and we consciously watched different news outlets so the kids could see that it would be very different depending on who they listened to. So we had many discussions about the differences that the media could portray. I don't remember in this particular case, I don't remember which media had someone that didn't do it right, but I remember that it did happen. I just don't remember which one it was.
Was that part of your illustration or your lesson to the children?
The kids would say, "Oh, yeah, it's like the difference in watching Fox News or versus CNN." So they picked up on it because we had seen it before. We'd seen the differences in how things could be reported before.
For lack of a better term, a slant, if you will?
Could be.
Okay. Have you formed any opinions about this case, favorably or unfavorably, based upon that aspect, based upon the way that certain events may have been reported?
No.
It sounds that you're somewhat skeptical by nature of what you hear through the mass media.
Yes.
And as Mr. Delarianda asked, if you had to choose, or if you were put in a position where you were considering what was in the courtroom as opposed to what you may have heard somewhere else, would it be difficult for you to limit your consideration as to the facts of the case and how the law would apply to those facts to only what you've heard in the courtroom?
I think I could make that separation.
I take it that you don't usually watch Fox?
Not if I can help it.
We talked about slant for a moment. Do you believe that network has a particular slant?
Any network? Yes.
And Fox has their own slant?
I'm sure of it.
Do you think the other cable stations do? CNN, do you think?
Probably.
And do you ever watch MSNBC?
Rarely.
It almost sounds like you avoid some of those programs where people are analyzing and commenting on things, giving their spin on current events.
Everybody has an opinion.
We talked about a recording that you mentioned you had heard at least parts of where Mr. Zimmerman had called the police. There's another recording in connection with this case that's been in the news. It's a recording of a 911 call made by one of the residents in the community. Do you know of what I speak?
I think so.
And have you heard any of those recordings in the news?
I believe so.
Can you describe for me generally the recording that you've heard in the news?
Someone was calling for help, and they're trying to determine who that someone was.
Did you hear the recording with the cries for help?
I believe so.
Did you, in your mind, attempt to figure out who that was, as between Trayvon Martin or George Zimmerman?
Could I tell whose voice it was? No.
Did you form any opinion as to who you thought it was that
No.
was crying out for
No.
help? You don't have any opinion as you sit here today whose voice that may have been?
I do not.
Have you followed in the news any of the events in court surrounding that question, trying to identify whose voice that was?
Yes.
What have you followed, or generally what do you know about that aspect of the case?
But they were trying to determine whether or not you can tell a person's voice in a stressful situation, and whether or not they'd be able to figure out whose voice it was.
Did you, through the news, follow some of the evidence on that aspect of the case?
I'm not sure what you mean by all the evidence. I mean, they have the recording. Is that what you mean?
I'm sorry, I used evidence differently, yes.
Okay.
The recording being evidence, but then the evidence in the proceeding that was addressing the recorded evidence. Now, that doesn't help a bit, does it? Okay.
No.
Hmm? Mm-hmm. Pardon me? Testimony would be evidence offered in court, perhaps about evidence. It's also evidence, but I'm talking about testimony relating to the recorded call with the screaming. Did you read any articles or watch any of the testimony in connection with that issue?
I didn't read any articles. I heard the issues on probably a newscast, but a lot of that was, I think, last week. And last week I was at a conference and really didn't pay a tremendous amount of attention to any news.
Do you know what the status of that issue is insofar as that evidence?
I do not.
Do you know what kind of testimony was offered?
Expert testimony. There's some voice experts.
Did you form any impression about that evidence, meaning who was screaming for help, or the experts themselves that may have testified in connection with it?
No.
You're aware that there's some proceedings ongoing about that, but don't know more at this point?
Correct.
Is there any, I know you talked about a picture or two that you've seen, and we've talked here a little bit about some of the recordings. Is there any other aspect of the case evidence, any other evidence that's been featured in the news that sticks out in your mind?
No, not that I can recall.
In your conversations with your children about news and slants and how cases can be, perceptions of cases can be changed by the way that the information is received. Did you talk about this case and what the evidence looked like may have happened or must have happened?
No, we've really never discussed this case in particular.
Mm-hmm. Did they ever offer an opinion to you about what they think happened?
No.
And likewise?
No.
When you made the comment earlier here today, I may have not gotten it exactly, but you said something like, when you heard about the event, the incident in February of last year, your reaction to yourself was sort of, oh my, we don't need this. Would you tell me a little bit more about what was going through your mind and what particularly concerned you?
that was really related not so much to the case, so much as the surround of it, the marches and protests and things like that. And we don't need this as, there are a lot of struggling businesses in Sanford. They're just really trying to make ends meet. A lot of little restaurants, little shops, a lot of art shops. And all of them depend on people coming into the area and feeling comfortable to be in Sanford. So surround that would say that this was a bad place, that Sanford was a dangerous place, that it was a racial hotbed, would not have impacted any of those things kindly. So we were really more worried about it from a, what will it do to the entire city kind of perspective.
Things were going pretty well for
Yeah.
downtown development.
Yes, yeah, moving in the right direction.
So if I understand what you're saying, it didn't really matter so much what side the publicity was on, just the idea of it being very divisive
Yes,
was your concern, how that might impact
the overall
business.
community.
Sure. Are you aware of the city of Sanford taking steps, doing things to minimize the effect, to being actively?
Absolutely.
Have-
The mayor of Sanford was on the board, on the art festival board.
Mr. Tripp. Did you talk with him at all about this case?
I did not.
Any opinions that he may have expressed privately that found their way to you, or publicly that you may have heard?
No, but when he spoke at various times about this, I did, pay attention.
You didn't pay attention to him?
No. I paid attention when, if Mr. Triplett was talking, I wanted to hear what he had to say.
We are also aware of some of the controversy surrounding the police chief.
Yes,
Do you know Mr. Lee?
I do not. Nor did I know the former police chief, but I did know the one before that.
As part of your community work?
Yeah.
Would it be part of your community work typically that you might interact with local government and the police chief even?
When we were trying to establish an art festival, you had to get to know all of those people because you have to have the appropriate security, you have to close down the streets, and so you're working with a lot of different departments within that community. So, yes.
Any social organizations you belong to or church where this case may have been discussed?
No.
You mentioned specifically that, I think you're talking generally about the case, that was a tough concept, and you referenced that the concept being that someone unarmed was shot by someone that was armed. Would you explain your thinking on that a little?
I don't own a gun, and I never really wanted to. So I can't conceive of being armed. I can't conceive of shooting anyone. But I can understand and accept people that do have arms. Somehow, shooting someone that is unarmed just seems like a tough concept. So something had to have happened in order to make it seem like a life-threatening situation.
Do you think it's possible that someone can be put in a life-threatening situation by someone who's not armed with a weapon?
Objection is
Absolutely.
improper at this time.
Okay, those are the questions that are more appropriate for the entire venire. We're just talking about pretrial publicity now. Her opinions on guns are better asked at a different time.
Yes, thank you. I apologize in advance that I might bounce around a little bit. Have you formed any preliminary opinion or firmly held impression about George Zimmerman, whether he's guilty or not guilty of the charge?
No.
We have just 1 moment. Thank you. I do have one other matter to ask you about, though, and that is the notion of the hardship that serving on the jury may cause you under various scenarios. I understand from what you've said that you are, is it the sole caretaker of your 18-year-old and your 15-year-old now?
I'm not the sole caretaker.
Is there someone that could attend to daily needs? I assume the 15-year-old's in, well, not now, not in school now.
No, he's not.
Okay. Is there someone available that could attend to whatever he needs during the day? And even during the evening, of course, if you should be sequestered.
Yeah, but not very well.
Maybe not up to your standard. The basic needs could be met, food and shelter and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I saw you maybe roll your eyes just
Yeah.
a bit. Maybe not the best, but it could work. Okay. Yes, it could.
Yes, I'm sure stranger things have happened.
And is the 18-year-old still living at your home?
Yes,
Boy or girl?
boys, both.
Both boys. Both boys. Is the 18-year-old of any use whatsoever in taking care of the 15-year-old?
Do you have children?
Yes, yes, ma'am. We don't need to talk about that.
Probably not.
So it may be a challenge, but you could make arrangements if you were to sit on the jury for the next 4 to 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks. Is that?
It would be a challenge.
Sure. And the primary issue in your mind is the dealing with the children's needs?
Children, the house, the dogs.
Sure. Domestic issues as
Yes.
opposed to employment or financial issues.
Since I'm a private consultant, you know, if I don't work for 6 weeks, I wouldn't get paid for 6 weeks. So.
Mm-hmm. No doubt with your relationship with government and you know the importance and the value of the civic duty that comes with jury.
I do, and feel strongly about that. I think everybody needs to do their civic duty.
Mm-hmm. And sequestration doesn't mean that you are completely without contact of your family. It's limited, of course, but there are visits arranged and that sort of thing.
Probably isn't visits. No. I went home yesterday and grocery shopped and cooked, things like that.
No doubt they would be monitored or supervised to some degree, organized and structured. Yes, you would not go home to attend to things. Unless perhaps it was in the presence of court security. I don't know that couldn't happen, but it would not be the idea that it's noon, come back at 7, yes. On the other hand, you still can have contact with your family through visits and such, but you wouldn't be able to deal with the dogs and that sort of thing. So, recognizing that it would be a challenge and may not be your first choice, of course, how you may want to spend the next 4 or 5 weeks. It's something it sounds like you could, if called upon, arrange.
I suppose I could.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll just remain seated for a moment. Counsel, when you're ready, approach the bench. Okay, Miss M75, that's what we're going to refer to you as your juror number. And you're brought into the courtroom so the attorneys will have an opportunity to ask you about the questionnaire that you filled out on Monday. And we're going to start with Mr. De La Rianda.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My name is Bernie De La Riona, and as Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to refer to you as, I think it's M75. Okay, so at any time, make sure you don't mention your name or anybody else's name that we're asking you about, okay? Okay. And we're limiting this questioning regarding just media in terms of the questionnaire that you filled out. So you understand we're kind of limited as to what we're asking you at this time. Okay. I have here that you mentioned that you obviously have not, based on what you said here, you have not formed an opinion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you mentioned that what I have written here, to make sure I can read your writing, I can. The case has been heavily televised since the time of Mr. Zimmerman's arrest, and communities all across the country have been talking about the case in the social media. Okay. Let me start off in terms of what exposure you've had in terms of media. Was it on TV, newspaper, or internet, or a combination of?
It was a combination of. First, I heard it from TV. Once it was televised, then it blew up in the social media.
The TV, was it local or national or both?
First, it was local. Then, as it got more exposure, it became national.
Okay. In terms of the TV station, do you recall, was there a particular station that you heard about it from, or that you focused on in hearing about the case? What local station?
I believe it was Channel 13 News.
Okay.
That's usually the one I refer to.
Sure. And how about national news? What TV station would you?
Fox News, usually.
Okay. Would you have possibly watched other news, but mainly focused on Fox and Channel 13?
Correct.
Okay. Then you mentioned also social media. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What was it? Facebook, Twitter, Google, or whatever other?
Mostly Facebook. That's usually the social media that I use. Twitter was also a big part, but more Facebook because of the images that you can put on Facebook, and it's more, I guess, hard-hitting and emotional.
I don't have a Facebook. My wife and kids do, but Facebook, you kind of pull it up, and then you're talking about news that kind of pops in, I guess. Is that correct?
Correct. People post statuses or post pictures, and it kind of goes from there.
Okay. And so would you have also been exposed to commentary about the case from people?
Correct.
Okay. I'm assuming that you heard commentaries about the case, and is that correct?
That is
and
correct.
Still, that did not sway you one way or the other? Is
No,
that
sir.
correct? Okay. Did you by chance do any, I guess there's like YouTube too now, people putting stuff on YouTube. Did you do any research about the case or come across aspects of the case from watching YouTube at all?
Not really. On Facebook, they will post videos from YouTube, but more so from the news standpoint, what they saw on the television that comes to young.
And what I'm trying to distinguish in terms of what I'm asking you is one aspect is just straight news, and then there's commentary about the news, and sometimes those kind of go together on Fox News or other stations, you know, that people have commentary about it. They bring in lawyers or they bring other people talking about the case. So that's what I'm trying to get from you. Your source would have been just strictly, would you have focused on news, or would you have also been exposed to commentary about the news?
More so the news. Commentary, everyone has an opinion, so that's neither here nor there.
Sure. Let's talk about Fox News. Are you looking just in the morning where they have, I think, a lady and two gentlemen in the morning, or are you talking about in the afternoon where they also have different panels, but they also then have shows, Bill O'Reilly, you know, Sean Hannity, that kind of stuff? Do you recall where your source of information about this case would have been from?
It's usually just the morning. I tune in just to keep an update what's going on with the world. So
Okay.
usually afternoons, just not really news.
So you don't partake in watching the evening shows that they have a lot of commentary about different subjects?
Correct.
Okay. Would your exposure to this case from the media aspect have been at the early stages of this case back in February of 2012? Was that your first exposure to it, or was it later on?
It was when the incident first happened. It's very local. We live right down the street, so
Okay.
it was very, very soon.
Okay. So you would have heard about it, you would have focused on it and heard about it in terms of on the news locally, and then you continue to pay attention to it?
Yes and no. There's continuous commentary about it on Facebook, and as you're just going through, it comes up, and I just keep going.
Okay.
But as it came back on the news, I just keep in touch. I like to know what's going on locally.
Sure.
So.
Okay. And I guess my question is, at some point, did you just kind of look at the headlines, or did you focus and read all the stories that there were about the case as it was progressing through the stages of the arrest of Mr. Zimmerman, you know, do you follow me, up to right now in terms of court proceedings?
Just the headlines that have been in the news so far.
Okay. Did you follow any of the court proceedings at all? You know, did you tune in when there were court proceedings, what was happening in court, rulings by the judge, arguments, that kind of stuff?
Not really. And initially, when it happens, I listened to some of the statements that both sides were making. But as it faded and there were other national news coming up, I haven't kept up.
Okay. How about commentary from local people? not national people, but just local people, attorneys or others about the case? Have you focused in on that, or did you hear any of that? Let me start off with, did you hear any of that?
It's been around as far as the social media is concerned, because it is local. A lot of my friends still live in Sanford and Lake Mary, so I still hear commentary about it, but I haven't focused at all on it.
Do you recall at this time, in terms of any particular attorneys or other so-called experts that talked about the case that you remember?
No.
Do you remember any names of anybody?
No, sir.
Did those commentaries by attorneys or other people have caused you to have an impression about the case one way or the other when they were commenting about the case?
No, sir. So far, as I had understood, there hadn't been a trial, so you can't really have an opinion if you don't know everything.
So you believe in the concept of this great country that everybody's entitled to a trial or an opportunity to have a trial, correct?
Absolutely.
And that the evidence is determined at a trial in terms of guilt or innocence. You believe in that concept?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, all right. Now, did you form any opinions? I know you saying you don't have an opinion, but did you form any, maybe opinion is incorrect word, did you form any impressions when you first heard about the case?
Not really, no. When you hear about something like this on the news, we weren't there, so we don't know what happened. So you see what's been televised, what the reporters are saying, but there's no way to know.
Sure. Okay. Now, you mentioned, I think we've covered most of the media sources that you went to. Did you talk to friends about the case?
Yes.
Okay.
In work, some people that have lived locally.
Okay. Did they give you their opinions about the case?
Absolutely.
Okay. Were the opinions all one-sided in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of the state in terms of Trayvon Martin, or was it a combination of?
Definitely a combination.
Okay. Did those opinions sway you one way or the other?
No.
Okay. You still were able to keep an open mind, agreed to abide by our great Constitution?
Absolutely.
Okay. How about with family? Did you have any discussions with any family members about the case?
My family, they kind of have the same views as I do. They want to see everything presented first before they can form really an opinion or an impression.
Okay. And so they agree with you in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But did they express opinions about the case?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Did that sway you one way or the other?
No. Speculation, really, you can't really sway me from that.
So you don't believe in speculation and arriving at decisions?
Well, you can arrive at a decision from speculation, but you need the facts first.
So you agree that speculation has to be taken out of the picture, in other words, so you have to rely on the facts?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other aspect you mentioned? I apologize. You mentioned Twitter originally. Do you? What happens when do you Twitter? I guess is that the correct phrase?
Tweet.
You tweet. Excuse me. Do you do any of that?
I do, yes.
Okay. Did you do any tweeting? Is that a good word to
Yes.
describe it? Did you do any of that regarding this case?
No, not really. A lot of people, like the news stations do have Twitter accounts like Fox News, ABC, things like that, where it comes up and you can see their opinions or what's being aired, but I don't really tweet about something that I don't know about.
Right. As I understand the concept of my limited knowledge of it, that apparently people can do it anonymously. In other words, they don't have to put, if your name is, you're M75, you don't have to put M75, you can put some fictitious name.
Right.
Did you ever do that, is my question?
No.
All right. And then there was also apparently websites dedicated to one side or the other. Did you ever look at any of those websites or commentary about that?
No.
Let me rephrase the question. Did you look at any of those websites?
I have not.
Okay. You mentioned that communities all over the country have been talking about this case, or I think is what you stated about the case. And is that based on just what you saw in national news? You haven't gone like to Chicago, New York, or LA and talked to people about the case?
No. My Facebook friends, they are from all over the country, and they're also aware of the case as well. So they also post their opinions.
So that's what you meant when you put that in the questionnaire?
Correct.
Okay. And I gather, even though they're friends, their opinions did not sway you one way or the other. Is
Correct.
that correct? Okay. part of serving as a juror is that, we realize most people don't live as hermits, in a cave somewhere or an island, and so there is exposure from the media. And so the question is, if you're picked as a juror, you get to sit in one of the chairs back there, you listen to the evidence, and you hear some evidence such as, and I'm making this up so it's not fact specific, because we're not allowed to get into the facts of the case, other than if you saw something on TV or stuff. But if I were to say that a witness said the car is blue, that there was a car involved and it was blue, and then you're sitting there and you're going, hold on, there was something in the news about the car being red. Which one would you rely on?
I would rely on what was presented in court.
In other words, you agree that if you recall something in red, the car being red, somebody in the news saying that you can't use that at all.
Correct.
Can you agree that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? You can? In other words, because you have been exposed, as you noted, in terms of media, but you understand that sometimes when you're listening to the evidence, even though that may come into your mind, that you have to completely disregard that.
Correct.
And you can agree to abide by that?
Yes.
As we stand here, or I stand here, you sit here, you can agree to abide by the court's instructions in terms of relying only on what happens in the courtroom and your God-given common sense and the law that the judge will give you?
Absolutely.
Okay. We also, in the part of the questionnaire, talked about, the trial in terms of how we're estimating how long it may take or not, depending on how long it takes to pick a jury. And that potentially, the judge hasn't made a final decision, the jury may be sequestered that. I'm assuming that you can agree to abide by that and you agree to serve that will not present a conflict. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
May I have a second? Any other aspect in terms of your job or other things that you're doing that you talked about this case with other people that influence you in any way whatsoever?
Not really. People at my job, they read the headlines like I do, so we're more into what's going on nationally.
Okay. So that in no way caused you to have an opinion one way or the other in the case?
Correct.
You're still of the opinion that you can keep an open mind regarding this case, is that correct?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hara.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? As was sort of apparent by what Mr. De Leon had talked to you about, this is a very limited inquiry. We're just trying to find out more information that you've heard about the case before today, from whatever source, and then I might drill in a little bit to what you think about what you've heard. The main purpose of that all is to make certain, one, that we identify it,
Right.
and that we talk about it so that we can at least see what impact it might have on you if you sit as a juror. Okay, so as I go through these questions, that's the purpose. And if I'm asking you a question, I would hope that that response would then be in that regard. Okay? And if it sounds like I'm asking you things that you don't know why I'm asking, just let me know. I'll try and clear it up, because that happens on occasion with me.
Okay.
All right? You had stated that when you first heard about this case, you heard it first on local TV before it sort of became a national event.
Correct.
Tell me what the first thing is that you remember hearing about it.
I remember hearing about a fatality in Sanford, and that's just right around the corner, so I was immediately interested because I have friends there. So after that, and names started coming up and things like that, just kind of kept in tune to see if any of my friends knew who it was or anything like that, and it didn't turn out to be that way. So,
when did you first hear that it was more specific than just a general fatality?
I can't give you a specific date, but I believe it was around the beginning of the year, probably February or March.
Okay, it happened on February 26th of 2012, so let's use that as sort of the focus date. It sounds like you don't recall specifically when in relation to the event actually happening, or do you?
It was a couple of weeks after it was aired, so probably late March then.
Okay. When it became then more focused, or more national, what do you remember hearing about it?
Still a lot of the same information that kept going over and over again about the arrest and Mr. Martin's death. More so came in the speculation to what may have happened, and a lot of commentary from the social media and things like that.
Within the question of the speculation, tell me about what you heard about the speculation.
What may have happened, why Mr. Martin had died, why they were out so late, this, that, and the other, and to what may happen at the end of the case.
Did there come a point then in your knowledge of it that a racial component was identified?
That came to me more as speculation than anything. So I can't say for sure that it was televised because I'm not sure whether I heard it first over the media or if it was on Facebook or Twitter.
Tell me then when the first time was that you heard that this event may have had a racial component to it.
I believe it was on Facebook. People were saying that it may have been a racial issue. Then it became more, I saw more of it on television as people started protesting and creating groups and things like that.
And tell me a bit more than what you did hear about that facet of what was going on.
That because he was of Black or African American race, he was out at night. He was looking, I guess, as people would say, shady. That's the reason they say that people were speculating that he may have been targeted.
Okay.
Using those words loosely.
Sure. Anything else about that part of the coverage that you're aware of?
No, that's really all
How about what they were saying about the other person involved, Mr. Zimmerman? Any insight or any speculation that was out there about his role in it?
Not that I can remember. No, I really can't say that there was.
Okay. And are we still now talking about the first couple or 3 weeks after the event?
Correct.
And this is when it was going from local more to national coverage?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like that you got some of your coverage, again, some local stations, some from Fox, and then a fair amount from Facebook?
Correct.
In addition to Fox, are there any other national stations that you watch?
ABC.
Okay.
That's really all the only two national ones that I usually watch.
Maybe I'll ask it this way. There are a bunch of them, obviously.
Right.
500 now or more, but we'll focus on some of the bigger ones like ABC you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You ever watch CBS?
No, not usually.
MSNBC?
Not usually, no.
Regular NBC?
Not
CNN?
CNN sometimes.
Okay. On Fox, what shows do you watch?
Just the morning news to see what's happening nationally. So,
Any particular show?
not that I can recall is at the title.
Okay. It's just news, I would
Mhm.
imagine. Okay. Any particular anchors that you would, somebody was here earlier talking about, I think, Peter Jennings, or I don't know who it was, who said that there's a particular person that they like listening to. Do you have somebody on Fox?
No. I'm terrible with news anchor names, so I couldn't tell you.
And the only time you watch Fox then is in the morning. You ever watch some of the, I think Mr. Del Rionda suggested some of the afternoon or evening programs. And I took some notes but didn't get it all down. Do you watch any of those programs on Fox as well?
No, other than the news in the morning, just other shows.
Okay. Do you think that Fox has any particular perspective on their news presentation?
Depends on what they're, I guess, presenting. More national news, more to do with the White House, I believe they do, rather than what may be happening like locally.
because I know that there are some people on Fox, like Sean Hannity, I think it was Mr. DeLeon who even mentioned Bill Wiley. Do you ever watch those guys?
No, not usually.
Do you understand their perspective to be one or the other across the political spectrum?
It depends, again, on what they're talking about. If they're talking about the White House, they definitely have one end of perspective, but on a case like this, I don't believe they have one way or the other.
Okay. Tell me then what you did hear about, or some of the examples of what you learned about this case from Fox.
Mostly from the when I did start watching Fox, mostly about the protests and things like that were going on. People that were wearing the hoodies and carrying the Arizona cans and eating Skittles and things like that. As far as like details about the case, just names, dates, where it happened. Nothing that was specific to what may have happened.
Okay. As you were getting that coverage then, the protests and the reaction to the event, are you speaking of the reaction of the black community to the event with the protest and the hoodies and things like that?
Not just the black community. I mean, since both are very young, it's also just the college community in general. Because some of the black community do feel like they are being targeted. Others just feel like that just a young person like that should have been, I guess, making better decisions or whatever may have happened. So it's a mixture of things.
And tell me how that coverage or the reality of what was being covered affected you.
Truthfully, it didn't affect me one way or the other. I really don't believe that black people were being targeted. And since you can't speculate without having a trial. Not all the facts were presented, and just going by off of what everyone else is saying, I can't really form an opinion one way or the other. So it didn't affect my day-to-day life.
Did it concern you then that other people seem to be forming opinions by protesting?
Some people were protesting. I do know a lot of my friends actually have been invited me to protests and things like that, but I don't really usually partake. Since we do live in Seminole County, Sanford is a very big community. And a lot of the protests down there, people were taking off of work and things like that. So I guess it kind of affected me that way, where you have to cover people's shifts and stuff because they wanted to do other things. But other than that, no, not really.
Okay. Anything else about the news coverage itself that that affected you?
No, not really.
And then you had also talked about that you had some input from people on Facebook.
Right.
And tell me, first of all, sort of what group it is you're talking about. And by that I mean, I know that there are friends that you have on Facebook and that there's interaction there. And then there's also interaction where you can just sort of get information generally from Facebook. Let's talk about the information generally from Facebook first. And can we artificially separate those two for a minute?
Right.
Okay, thanks. Let's talk about that first part then for a moment, which is the news feeding or the news feeds that you get from Facebook. Tell me what you got from that.
Mostly they were the groups that felt like they were targeted. People that were protesting, they would post like events and things like that where they were going to be meeting and stuff like that. So more so of organizing, I guess, the protests. As far as the information, it was more of what the news was showing as far as like pictures and snippets of like the newsreels and things like that were being shown. Less commentary as far as just the general information side.
Okay. And you've talked about pictures and other things being shown. I know that Mr. DeLeon just spoke to you a bit about that. I'm going to try not to repeat it too much, but I want to try and get a little bit of focus. If I ask you for the three things, the three visual pieces of information that you got about this case in the beginning, tell me what they would be.
It would be Mr. Zimmerman's mugshot.
Okay. And just so we're clear, because obviously, would you agree that this case has had just an avalanche of information that's sort of been flowing around out there?
Yes.
I don't put words in your mouth. I'm sorry. I should
Well,
just asked you.
Depending. It's more, it's not, I feel like there's not enough information. It's the same information just going over and over again, and then everyone's commentary.
Okay. The mug shot that you talked about, is that the one with the orange shirt?
I
Or-
believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And now I asked you for 3, so that's 1.
The second one would be the memorial set for Mr. Martin.
Mhm.
That's located near his house.
Okay. Just a picture of that. Okay.
And then the last one would be just other people that are dressed in hoodies with the Arizona can, kind of like an in memoriam of,
Trayvon.
yeah.
Okay. Would you like some water?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, I'm going to grab some. Okay. First reaction when you saw George Zimmerman's mugshot? Just right off the top of your head, just the first reaction you saw it.
Truthfully, my first reaction was like, who's that?
Okay.
So
When you realized it was the person who shot Trayvon Martin, what did you think?
just, I mean, I didn't really have very much of a reaction, only because I didn't know what happened. When you post a picture on Facebook, you can then put in like commentary and most with the mugshot, you normally just said his name, so it didn't really have very much of a story, I guess, to it.
Okay. And the memorial about Trayvon Martin?
That one, I did think it was sad. It looked very large. I haven't been in that area.
Mhm.
From what I could tell, more of that was to I guess, I don't want to say advertise, but for people to go, if they wanted to go and place more things and like stuffed animals and letters and things like that if they wanted to. So that I just thought was just very nice. That the community is being able to kind of come together.
So both sad in that it was memorializing the passing of a 7-year-old, and nice in that it was a cause for community.
Right.
Okay. Similarly then, or tell me what you thought about the picture that you saw with the solidarity photograph about Trayvon or hoodies and Arizona iced tea.
Those ones I thought were just a little bit ridiculous. I understand that was what he was wearing or the night when he was shot, but to say that to then go ahead and turn around and say that black people are being victimized or that he was targeted because he was looking shady or something like that, I thought it was a little I guess overwhelming. I think a lot of people did go ahead and wear the hoodies and things like that, and symbolizing that, you know, his passing, as well as, I guess, the coming together of the black community. But I just thought it was a little bit ridiculous. And then people have already formed an opinion, can't really say. Don't know what happened.
I think we've morphed over. Well, let's morph over then to the friends on Facebook. And anything else? I'm sorry. Anything else about what information flow you had about this case from sort of the general news flow from Facebook?
No, usually just copying what they've seen on other news stations.
Has it been sort of an ongoing flow since you first noticed it, even through today?
No. As it faded from the headlines and other things came up, it kind of also faded from Facebook. But now that the trial is kind of at hand, people have more so now.
As to that, I'm sorry.
Been posting it now.
As from that side, the news side, what have you noticed about the coverage in the past few weeks or however since it has sort of come back?
Just that it's more local now. Seminole County, not that I can remember, has seen such a big case. So more people are excited that there's more, I guess, bonding in the community. But other than like specifics of the case, I haven't seen very much since I've been here all week.
Okay. Then it's more over to the friends on Facebook. I think you said that on Facebook it's sort of across the spectrum as far as your friends and their opinions on the case?
Correct.
Tell me where the majority of that would be. What's the majority opinion of your friends on Facebook regarding this case?
The majority, I can't say in favor, but they are on the side of Mr. Martin where he may have been victimized or targeted or something like that. And most of my friends on that side, they're from different colleges and things like that, going to school around the country, so they are younger. But they are also very educated. They pay attention to the news and things like that. So they're more, I guess, proficient in the protesting and things like that have been going on in the community.
Okay. And are there also some then who, as you had stated, have not made up their minds yet or waiting to hear the evidence?
Right, absolutely. A lot of my friends are also going to go to school to be lawyers. So though a lot of those people, they also have opinions like me. They want to be presented everything before they can form some kind of opinion.
Tell them to do something else. We don't need any more lawyers. And are there any of your friends, or what percentage of that now group of friends we're talking about, what I'm going to call pro-George Zimmerman, as opposed to the other ones we spoke about, which is for this question, we'll say pro-Trayvon Martin. Let's not do that. How about those people who have formed an opinion different than the other ones? Tell me about those.
I would say it's probably about a 40-60 split, 40 that haven't formed an opinion, 60 that have in favor of Mr. Martin. For those that haven't formed the opinion, they pay attention to the news. They don't really have, I guess, a political affiliation, so they're not right or left. Those that are for Trayvon Martin, they like to be active in the community. They have been part of the protests and things like that, and a lot of them do live in the Sanford area. So I feel like that may have hit home more so for them than other people that have, like, they live in other parts of the country.
And is that 60-40-60 who have formed an opinion in favor of what we talked about, sort of Trayvon Martin's side, and 40% who have not formed an opinion?
Right.
Are there any of your friends then who have formed opinions truly in favor, saying, for example, that George Zimmerman was okay what he did, or justified what he did? Any friends in that category?
Yes, but they're very, very, very small majority.
Of those people who have sort of seemed to have formed an opinion that would believe that George Zimmerman was justified in what he did, or whatever that opinion might be, tell me some of the comments that they've made in that regard.
Their comments were more so, I would say, that if there's always a reason to do something. So if we don't know what Mr. Martin may have been doing, but if he had drawn attention to himself, then there must have been a reason for doing so. And there was a reason that he did what he did. So I can't really remember exactly like the verbiage that they were using, but more so in that sense.
Anything else that we haven't talked about? And again, premise being, I'm just trying to find out what you sort of bring to you, with you, to today. So anything else from that group of friends on Facebook and their interaction regarding this event that we haven't covered?
No, I think we covered it all.
And you talked about, how about just then your social friends, the close social knit group that you have, including your family? You said that they sort of have the same views that you do.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Any of your family members have views that are more polarized, that have already made up their mind one way or the other?
I would say some of my family do, the younger ones, cousins and things like that, that have formed an opinion, I guess, in favor of Trayvon Martin. But my immediate family that I see every day, they want to wait and see exactly how the trial will progress, lay out all the facts, and then form an opinion that way.
And when a person of your age says somebody is younger, we're just talking about maybe teenagers or something?
Right, teenagers, high schoolers.
Okay. And how about your sort of social friends? Tell me, across the spectrum, just the people that you would go out to dinner with or however you socialize, how do they fall in this spectrum of support for one side or the other?
They're fairly in the middle, just like me. They want to see exactly what evidence both sides have before they can really form an opinion. So, like, this conversation probably wouldn't even come up over dinner or even in a regular everyday conversation until the trial starts. And we'll be like, oh, do you remember what that person said? Okay, so then we can start forming opinions once it starts.
Are you familiar with anyone who you would consider to be an activist on one side or the other in this case?
More so my friends that don't live in Florida. I have friends that live in New York, some in California as well as Chicago that probably be more activists, but more in their community where they would form the protests and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with any activists, not necessarily your group of friends now, so I'm bouncing a little bit, in the Sanford community or in the Central Florida community, any activists that you're who've taken positions in this case?
Not that I'm familiar with. Of course, if you go downtown Sanford on a night, they may be having a rally or something. You can kind of get into that, but I haven't been in contact with anyone from the Sanford area.
This is the question that we could ask, and I could have just saved 15 minutes, but we just try and figure out to try and drill into a little bit what you know about. But the concern is that if we don't do this here today, and something comes up in your mind later, some comment on Facebook, or something that you remember seeing or hearing about that doesn't come into trial, that you have the right tools or instructions from the judge as to how to handle that. So the question really is, if in fact you do have some memories, and we tell you to bring your common sense with you, so we're not going to ask you to leave that outside, but we are going to ask you to leave outside memories that are case specific.
Right.
And if that comes up while you're deliberating, so the case is over, you've heard all the evidence you're supposed to hear, you've listened to the judge, and you're now back with the other jurors talking about the case and doing what you're supposed to do, which is decide. If something comes up, you remember something that you haven't heard about in the courtroom, how would you handle that?
If I didn't hear it in the courtroom, we can't consider it because it wasn't presented. So as a jury, you're supposed to consider everything that was presented in the case, so it would be irrelevant. Or at least in my mind, it would be.
Okay. And how about if another juror remembers something in the courtroom and chats with you about it while deliberating?
Well, that would also be irrelevant. We'd have to let them know, okay, well, even though you may have heard that, it wasn't presented in the case. Probably have to go back and make sure it wasn't presented in the case, because sometimes it may be like the backside of something that may have been presented, but if it never came up, then it never came up. You can't consider it.
Okay. Let me just have a minute. I'll be right back with you. Okay. Thank you. A few other questions. We had talked about most of the communities that you interact with, Facebook, general news, and your friends. Are you active in church?
No.
Okay. Have you been in the past couple of years?
No.
All right. So that would not be an area where you would have any interaction or conversations about this case then?
Correct.
Okay. We talked about I asked you for 3 things that were most visual. So let me just ask a couple of other things just to make sure that I see whether or not you had any other exposure to certain facts in the case. Have you seen any other pictures of George Zimmerman?
The only other pictures were the ones that have been taken by the media as he's being led to and from different jails or the court or things like that. So
Okay.
not in anything before the case.
All right. Have you seen any pictures depicting injuries?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. Have you seen any pictures at all of Trayvon Martin?
Just the ones where they have the in memory of with his, I guess it was a high school photo.
Okay. And that's the only one you recall seeing?
Right. Mm-hmm.
If I asked you to quantify how many times over the past 16 months that you've had some exposure to this case, Facebook, comments from friends, talking to people about it, and I'm not going to ask you any more than just the total amount. Since this case has started and your first exposure to it on local TV, about how many times do you think that you've heard something or anything about the case?
Since it began, I would say probably maybe 100 times. More so at the beginning of the year than right now. But I can't really put an actual physical number on it.
And do you read any newspapers at all, or you get most of your information from the sources we've already talked about?
Mostly just the television and the social media.
Like Sanford Herald, I think it is, or Orlando Sentinel, anything like that?
Not really, no.
You had said that you have friends, a number of friends in the Sanford area.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any friends in the area where this occurred?
No.
No? Okay. Thanks very much for the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So just remain seated for a moment. Counsel, when you're ready, please approach. 75. Can we see our next juror?
R39.
Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. Please be seated, everybody. And sir, from now on, you're going to be referred to as Juror R39. Okay? All right. And you're here this morning because the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to talk to you about the questionnaire you filled out on Monday. We're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're limited to asking you questions about your questionnaire, and the first thing I had is, I want to make sure what I'm reading is correct. My writing is also terrible, and I'm talking about your handwriting. Support, we have the original questionnaire, Your Honor, that this witness, may I just have the witness, the juror, give it to the juror a minute. I want to make sure I'm sorry, can you give it to the juror, please? With the court's permission that we give it to the juror. What you notated on here, and I know you scratched out some part, but I was trying to make sure I read it. My copy wasn't that legible as you did. I have here, all I've heard is that George Zimmerman is on trial for the murder of Trayvon Martin. I don't really, and I couldn't read that last word, I don't really
care about what happened.
You don't really care about what happened. Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure I had that right. Thank you, Deputy. And you stated, by way of your questionnaire, that you had not formed an opinion in this case. Is that correct?
That could be from what I hear. You can take that. Yes, you can. Yes. I haven't formed an opinion.
You had not formed an opinion. I want to make sure I had that right. Your answer was, have you formed an opinion as to the defendant's guilt or innocence, and you said no. Did I have that right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Let me talk a little bit in terms of your exposure to the media. Your information about learning about this case, was it on TV, newspaper, or from what source did you get it?
Yeah, I really don't watch the news, you know what I mean? If there's something that comes up that's important or big like that, my mom will talk about it, or my father.
Okay. So you really don't partake in watching the television in terms of local news or national news?
Not on a daily basis.
Okay. And do you recall at this time whether you were exposed to any commentary or news about this case? And let's talk about when it first happened, back in February of last year.
Yeah, it was all over there was no way not to get
So
around.
You would have seen it. It would have been hard not to see it, I guess.
Yeah, it's on the news. On the news, on the radio, you know what I mean? It's hard to not get away from it, especially at that time.
Is your main source just from your family telling you what's on the news, or you yourself, like listening to it on the radio when you're traveling?
Well, like when it first happened, I wasn't really into it or anything, but then, you know what I mean? I was like, it was already on the news and everything, and it was on the radio, so you know what I mean? I watched a little bit of it.
Okay.
I didn't really pay much attention.
Sure. And then, are you involved in social media at all, on Facebook or any other stuff?
Facebook, Instagram.
Okay.
All that.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Did you come across this case as part of looking through Facebook and stuff?
Yeah, a lot of people commented and stuff like that.
Okay. You mentioned Facebook, and the other one was what? Instagram?
Instagram, yeah, but that's really the only thing. I don't do Twitter or anything, just Facebook.
Okay, so that's not tweeting or Twitter at all?
No, it's more like pictures or whatever. You know,
Okay,
take a
all
picture
right.
and show it to everybody.
Let's talk about when it first happened. Do you recall seeing photographs regarding the case?
Yeah, I remember when they had that big rally thing and everybody was down there. I remember seeing that hearing it on the radio.
Sure.
Because I do landscaping. I mostly get my news and stuff from the radio.
And just to make sure, we're referring to you as R39, so do not mention where you live or anything.
Okay.
Even though it's on here, we're trying to keep that anonymous. But you did mention you landscape, so you travel around the city, I gather, or around the county.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you have heard about it on the radio also?
Yeah, that's usually where, if I hear about something in the news, it's usually with
As
the
you're
radio
working?
because I'm
Okay.
working.
You wear the headphones too as you're?
No, just usually in the truck, yeah.
Okay. Other than the fact you mentioned what already about the photographs, you remember anything, other photographs coming to mind?
No, just pictures of the guy, Trayvon or whatever, stuff
The
like
guy
that.
that was killed or the Mr. Zimmerman?
The guy that was killed, like
Okay,
pictures of.
Trayvon Martin you're
Yeah,
talking about?
Trayvon, yeah.
Okay. And you remember what pictures you saw of Trayvon Martin?
Yeah, like the one that was like a gray silhouette with the hoodie on and stuff like that,
all right.
and things like other
Did
pictures.
you form
from
any
the-
impressions when you saw that?
I really don't judge people by what they look like.
Okay. So the fact he was wearing a hoodie did not have impact on you whatsoever?
No, wearing a hoodie is because you're cold.
Okay. Any photographs that you've seen of George Zimmerman, if there were any, did you see any?
His mugshot, it was on
Okay.
Facebook.
And did that have any impact on you whatsoever? No?
From a
Okay.
person who has mugshots, you know what I mean?
Okay.
It's just another picture to me.
Sure, okay. Now, have you kept up with the case since it first occurred back in February of last year?
No.
Okay. In other words, have you paid attention to any of the court proceedings, like what's happened in court, court's ruling, motions, witnesses, if there were any of that kind of stuff?
No.
Okay. Would your contact with this case have been at the very beginning and then just kind of knowing that it's out there somewhere and it's in this community?
Yeah.
Okay. You got your jury summons, right, about what, 3-4 weeks ago? Did you do any research thinking, man, I might be on the George Zimmerman case?
It didn't hit me until like a couple days before, until like last Friday.
Okay, so you thought, because did you see any news stories about what was going on in terms of the trial starting?
My mom was like, remember you have jury duty on Monday, and she's like, you know what that is? I was like, I have really no idea. And she
So she
informed
told
me.
you potentially it might be the George Zimmerman case?
Yeah.
Okay. As a result of that, did you then get on Facebook or get on the internet and do your own research about the case?
No, not really, because it hasn't happened. Not
Okay.
in that position. You know, I'm not a person to really care about what happens to other people. I try to stay to myself.
Okay. You kind of do your own thing and worry about yourself and your family?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, you mentioned that you discussed with your family. Tell me, if you could, what you remember them discussing about the case.
Just saying that it was tragic what happened. It was, you know what I mean, not really anything about it.
Did they give you any details like, yeah, your mother saying, oh, this is what happened today in the news and that kind of stuff, or just in general about?
Yeah, just in general what happened
Okay.
in both the news.
So you never got any specific information about this is what's happening in court, or there's this piece of evidence, or this witness, or whatever, is that correct?
No, people commit crimes every day. I don't pry on their information, you know what I mean? Just because this is a high-profile case or whatever doesn't mean I'm going to find out about it. That's just not the type of person I am.
Sure, okay. And I gather you didn't partake in national news in terms of looking at, TV on national news at all?
Mm.
Okay. How about in Facebook? I understand, because my kids, my wife have, that as you're going on, you can actually get news through Facebook. Did you see some news about the cases you're kind of going on Facebook?
No, it's just what people post, you know what I mean? And no news program really posts on Facebook, at least not on mine. So they don't really say anything about the actual news. But
So it's just people commenting about it?
People's comments, people's ideas, whatever.
Okay. And I gather people had opinions one way or the other, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did that sway you one way or the other?
From what I've heard, you know what I mean, maybe I would have an idea on.
Okay. So you people opinionated in favor of Mr. Zimmerman or in favor of Trayvon Martin? Is that true? I'm assuming on
Yeah.
Facebook? Okay. And what the law says is that you have to, if you heard about that, number one, you're allowed to hear about it or read about it. The question is, can you keep that outside? And I gather from your questionnaire that you said you had not formed an opinion as a result of that? Here's what we get to know. There's no right answer.
Okay, there's no right answer. I'm just trying to
we're just trying to
make
get
sure
the
I say
truth.
this clear enough because
Yes, sir. No,
I'm
I
a little
know.
dyslexic, so I say things backwards.
We're talking over each other, the court reporter can only take one person at a time, so
I
if you'll allow
apologize.
him to finish. Thank you.
I apologize, sir. I interrupted you.
I don't have an actual opinion about this actual case, but I do have an opinion about murder. Murder's murder no matter what.
Okay. So you believe murder's murder?
Murder is murder, even if you are in self-defense. This still doesn't make it right to kill somebody.
Okay. Now, do you understand that there is a law of self-defense, right? You've heard of that in concept.
Yeah.
And we're not going to talk about that in this time, but you understand, in order for a person to serve on a jury, they've got to listen to all the law.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the law is that the judge will give to you. Can you do that? Can you listen to the judge, to the law the judge will give you?
I don't see why not, but I still think even in self-defense, murder is still murder. You know what I mean? If you just premeditated murder, obviously is more of a charge than murder under self-defense, but it's still murder.
And not to get into education about the law, but the court may give an instruction about self-defense, and part of self-defense the court will instruct later, but it's a defense to if somebody kills somebody or murders somebody. The question is whether you can listen to the law and base your decision on the facts and combine that with the law and then your common sense.
So what were you asking?
But my question is, you said murder's murder,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think, it goes back to biblical times, murder's murder, but then there is the law of self-defense. And the question is whether you can keep an open mind and agree to listen to the instructions that the court will give you the law.
Yeah.
And apply that law to whatever belief you have right now.
Yeah, I could.
My question is, have you studied the law at all? I'm assuming you have not, right?
No, I have not.
Okay. And for being a juror, people come in, and what we're trying to find out is both sides, in terms of being fair to both sides, is what your opinions are or not, or what your beliefs are. But in order to serve as a juror, the law requires that you have your opinions, and you have to keep those outside the courtroom. People have opinions. Mm-hmm. In other words, let's say, and it's not this case, let's say there's a murder case, and people have beliefs about this death penalty. Some people say, death penalty, yeah, and then some people are against the death penalty. And in order to serve on that type of jury, people have to agree to follow the law and to keep an open mind and listen to all the evidence and then make a decision after you've heard all the evidence. You understand? But some people at the very beginning will say, I'm in favor of the death penalty. And some people will say, I can't. And if you can't put aside your beliefs, then you can't serve as a juror. And that's what we're trying to ask you, or I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah. So
are your beliefs such that you don't think you can set them aside?
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay, so you believe that you're biased one way or the other in this case?
Yeah.
Okay, and listen, there's no right answer other than what the truth is. I'm not trying to get you to sway one way or the other. At this time, you believe you cannot be fair to the defendant, Mr. Zimmerman?
Because it's a one-sided story. He's the only one who's here. There was only two people that were there when it happened, and he's the only one there. There's no dead man, no telling tale. You know what I mean? So anything could have happened, but it's just a one-way story in my mind.
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. West.
May we approach?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Very much, Juror R39. Appreciate your participation. If you'll follow Corporal Dems, he'll take you outside the courtroom. And can we have our next juror, please? Yes, let me stop.
Thank you.
Can you? No, I'm talking to somebody back there. No, sorry. But thanks you. Could you radio and let them know? Hold up, and we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. We are back on the record in State versus, nobody's here. Those of you who are here, please be seated. guess I should look up when I sit down. Okay, we're back on the record in case number 12CF1083A, State versus George Zimmerman. We're ready for our next potential juror?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, let's bring him in.
Ronald B. of Bravo 6-1.
Please be seated. Good morning. You can be seated, yes. We are referring to you by your juror number, which is B61, and the attorneys are going to ask you questions about the juror questionnaire that you filled out on Monday morning. We're going to start with Mr. De La Ronda. You may proceed.
Please report. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to ask you some questions. It's limited just to the publicity aspect at this time. You put in your questionnaire that there was a shooting. There was also several local protests all on the news. Is that what you basically remember about this case?
Yeah, I know there was a shooting. I know it took place here in Central Florida. I know that there was some issues with protesting after that. That's about it.
Did you hear about it when it first happened back in February of last year?
I think it was around the time it first happened.
Okay. And would you have heard about it in the news on TV or newspaper or radio or internet or a combination of it?
I watch Good Morning America. That's usually what they have on Good Morning America.
So it would have been national news?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall what you first heard about it on Good Morning America?
That there was a shooting and the question of whether someone went after. I know there was questions to, was there a cause or a reason for it to happen, or did it just happen? I remember that. And then just later on with the protesters, it seemed to turn into more of a racial issue.
Okay. How did you feel about that? What were your impressions about that?
My impressions are we should look at the crime. I don't think it's a racial issue. I think it's more what was right, what was wrong, and we have laws for a reason,
Okay.
and that's how you should look at it.
Okay. Did you subsequently keep up with the case as it was going through the proceedings here in court in terms of arrest, that kind of stuff?
No, sir, just whatever would come on Good Morning America, basically.
Right. So you limited your knowledge of this case just whatever happened on Good Morning America. You never saw any of the local stations about the case? Any of the local broadcasts?
No, not unless it's maybe a couple-minute blurb.
Right, okay. How about, do you partake in social media at all, Facebook or any of that stuff?
I do.
Okay. Did you happen to come across any stories or commentary about the case?
No,
None at all?
I don't think so.
Okay. And how about recently? Let's forget about last year. Within the last 6 months, have you paid attention to what's going on in court about this case?
No.
So you really were not concerned about the case at the very beginning?
Not really. Conversations have come up sometimes.
Sure.
Well, recently with it coming out again, but,
Right.
and wondering to see what's going to happen.
Sure. Now, you got the summons, 3-4 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you become more curious or curious about the case at that time at all?
No, other than my husband joking around.
Okay.
You-
What did your husband joke around about?
Just, you might be part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you did not do any research or anything once you got the summons thinking, I might have to know something about the case in order to get on the jury or not get on the jury?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, let's set aside media. How about conversations with people or family, your husband or other people about the case? Have you had conversations about the case?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about your husband first. What conversations, if any, did you have with your husband about the case?
We haven't, other than just the time that he said that comment, but we haven't had conversations now.
Has he expressed his opinion to you about what's going on in the case or anything like that?
No.
Okay. And you have not expressed opinions to him about, like, whether Mr. Zimmerman should have been arrested or anything about Trayvon Martin or anything like that?
No.
Nothing at all?
No.
Okay. How about with just other family members? Set aside your husband now. Did people talk to you about their opinions about the case?
Not really opinions. I guess more just that the case is coming up. Once with my mom.
Right. Does your mom live here locally?
Yes.
And did she express, what did she tell you about other than it's coming up?
That's about it. Just basically the case is coming up. I wonder what's going to happen. That kind of talk.
Now, any other friends talk about, or any other family, I should say, other than your mom?
No.
Okay. How about friends?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me, if you could, what you remember friends telling you about the case. And what I'm trying to find out is what, did they tell you, oh yeah, I saw this photograph, or I heard this witness, on TV, or that kind of stuff?
So a couple weeks ago, same thing. The case is coming up, and it's going to be in Central Florida, and just I wonder what's going to happen.
Okay. Nothing else? No opinions that they tell you?
He's
He's guilty or he's innocent, that kind of stuff?
No, because I don't think any of us could be sure of that.
Okay. How about, did anybody express comment or give you commentary about, I saw this photograph, or I heard a judge in court and she said this, this, and this? Not at all?
No.
Okay. Have you kept up with any of the commentary by, not just in court or police, but commentary by attorneys about the case?
No. I mean, I know on Good Morning America they usually have this one guy that makes
Right.
commentary, but I don't remember anything specific that he might have said, or
Okay.
even I'm sure he did, because that's just
Okay.
their format.
Nothing kind of sticks in your mind?
No.
Okay. How about any news conference or commentary from any of the attorneys involved in the case at all? Did you recall hearing from any of them?
No. I remember seeing one of them. Actually,
Mark O'Mara?
oh yeah, just
Okay.
that he was
Right
going to be on the
here.
case.
Okay. What do you remember seeing him on TV?
Yeah, that he was going to represent.
Okay. Do you remember him talking about the case, but no specifics, or just that he was representing?
No, I just remember his face from local news.
Did you form an opinion as a result of that?
No.
Okay. I'm assuming you didn't know Mark O'Mara other than seeing him on TV. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How about on Facebook, commentary on Facebook about the case?
No.
None at all?
No.
Okay. And have you visited any of the websites regarding this case? People in favor of George Zimmerman, people in favor of Trayvon Martin, or people
No.
expressing opinions? You haven't at all any of the websites?
No,
just,
I'm not
just
visiting.
you did it intentionally, just going through the internet.
No.
Okay. You never put the name like Google George Zimmerman, see what came up about it?
No. Actually, I do remember, I think in the very, very beginning, that perhaps Zimmerman was trying to raise money.
Right, okay.
I remember that. I think I did go to that website back then.
Okay, and what do you recall when you went to that website? Let's see if we can identify the website, because there may have been more than one website.
Okay.
Do you remember what the website looked like?
No.
Okay. And would that have been around the time that,
I just remember it was early in the case, and what I do remember
yes ma'am.
is basically it was almost like I think him writing and saying that he needed support for a case or the court.
Okay. And so this would have been a website that Mr. Zimmerman, it was under the name George Zimmerman versus the law firm that represents him?
I don't remember.
Okay. Was there something written by George Zimmerman, as best you can recall you reading?
I think it was something personal from
Okay.
him, yes.
And was it, and also did he speak in terms of, was there a video or was it just a written comment?
I don't remember there being a video.
Okay. Now, and was what you remember either hearing or reading, was it in English or was it in Spanish?
I think it was in English.
Okay. What was your impressions when you read that or saw that?
No impressions. I thought it was unique.
You thought it was what?
Unique.
Unique? Okay. What do you recall about the commentary, or whether it was written or video? What do you recall seeing? Or right now, what do you remember about that?
Basically, all I remember is that he was trying to raise money.
Okay. And I'm assuming you did not send any contributions?
I did not.
Okay. Do you know of anybody that did?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you talk to your husband or other family members about possibly sending money?
No.
Okay. And obviously you didn't know you were going to be a juror. Was there a reason why you didn't decide not to send money?
No. I just thought it was interesting.
Okay. Okay. What other than it was interesting? And let me, I guess, get you to expand a little bit. When you say interesting, what do you mean by interesting?
I guess I'd never seen a defendant trying to raise money, so that was the only reason.
Okay, so that was just unique, is what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I gather, based on the questionnaire you filled out, you have not formed an opinion. Is that correct in this case?
I have not.
Okay. And you also were asked about in terms of when you have a conflict in terms of being able to serve for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
The court has not formally decided in terms of made a final decision about whether jurors will be sequestered or not. I'm assuming that will not be a potential conflict for you?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Other than Good Morning America, what are the kind of shows do you watch in terms of for your news? Is Good Morning America a hit?
No, sometimes I watch CNN. Good Morning America, just one thing
Sure.
in the morning, basically. Sometimes the local news, but usually CNN.
Okay. And at this time, you don't remember anything else in terms of related to this case on the local news or on CNN?
I do remember at one point their talk of just kind of trying to find certain things bad about Trayvon Martin.
Okay.
But I just remember that.
Right. What did you think about that?
Nothing.
You think that was good, bad, or you just didn't have an opinion?
No opinion. I just think people are trying to do their jobs.
Okay, all right. Do you recall when you say people are trying to find something bad about Trayvon Martin, do you recall there being something bad about Trayvon Martin?
I know they were just trying to pull out things from before the case.
Right.
Is what it seemed like.
Right. Do you remember anything specifically that they were actually pulled out?
I remember something about marijuana, but
Okay. Did you have an impression about that, whether that was true or not, and if it was true, whether it would impact you in terms of deciding whether this defendant is guilty or innocent?
yeah, I don't know. Since it's the media, you never know.
Okay, so you have the opinion, which I think is shared by a lot of people, that the media, you don't always believe what's on the media?
I don't think you always can now.
Okay. Do you think the media sometimes is biased one way or the other?
Yes.
Okay. Based on your knowledge of this case, did you think the media was, I'm saying media in a broad sense, did you think they were biased in favor of George Zimmerman or in favor of Trayvon Martin, or?
I think at times both
Okay.
sides. Yeah.
Okay. And did you think at the beginning they were in favor of one way and then later one way, or just depending on the day?
I think it was just about. It might have just been the day, you know,
Okay,
and maybe and who was talking.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Did that cause you to think about your feelings about the case? In other words, once you know, obviously opinions biased one way or the other, did that cause you to go, oh, okay, this side, today I'm kind of leaning towards that George Zimmerman is guilty, you know, the next day I'm kind of leaning that maybe he's innocent, that you didn't even think about that? I know you don't have an opinion right now, but at some point when you're hearing this, did it cross your mind in terms of I'm leaning this way or I'm leaning that way?
No, the only thoughts I've ever really had about this was when race is being brought into it, and that I don't think it's a racial issue. I don't.
What makes you think that it was not a racial issue? And I'm not indicating that it is. I'm just saying what made you believe that it was not? How did you come to that conclusion?
I think in the end, the whole purpose of having the system set up is to find out if something right or wrong was done. And we have laws for that, and that's what it is. And I don't think it really has to do with if you're a certain race or, you know, I don't think it has to do with race.
So in other words, in your opinion, it didn't matter, Trayvon Martin, if he was a white person, black person, Hispanic, or whatever, it should not matter?
No.
Okay. And you
and
noted
same thing with Mr. Zimmerman.
I'm sorry.
And the same thing with Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay. And you also noted in your commentary here on the questionnaire, there was also local protests. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, what you meant by that?
Oh, I just remember it being here in Sanford that there were just people outside. And he's a pastor, I think, and he came down. I remember that. It was in Good Morning America.
A pastor?
Reverend, maybe?
A reverend, okay. From somewhere not in Florida?
My name's escaping.
Okay. Was it a prominent pastor?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you feel about that?
I thought that if I was someone prominent.
I'm sorry, if you were what?
If I were someone prominent or famously known, I don't know if I would make something like this a racial issue and put my name on the line for something that I have not seen everything, or I don't know all of the facts, or I don't think I would have done that. Those are my thoughts.
You thought that was improper what that reverend did, I guess, based on what you know about it?
Perhaps.
Okay.
I don't know his reasoning.
Sure. Did you feel that the protesters were out of line and protesting about the case? Forget about the reverend coming in. I'm talking about just people here protesting about the case. And I'm using your word. You said protesting. Did you feel they were wrong in demonstrating or exercising their First Amendment free speech right?
No, I believe everyone has a right to think what they think and express that.
So you didn't come to any conclusions as a result of people objecting or expressing their opinions in a public setting and a group of them doing that?
No.
You didn't think that was a bad thing?
No, I mean, I had thoughts of whether I would do it or not, but...
I'm sorry, you had thoughts of, you don't think you would do it?
I don't think I would have protested at that. There was no reason for me to think to at that time. But if they want to protest, then they can protest.
And the only reason I'm asking you about that is because you mentioned it here, and so you were just commenting that that's just something you saw as opposed to saying you thought, you know, some people may have expressed that it was inappropriate, some people said that it was. You don't have an opinion one way or the other about that? Let's assume you're picked as a juror. You're sitting in one of the chairs back behind that box. You're listening to the evidence. And you hear a witness talk about, and I'm making this up, it's not related to this case because we're not allowed to talk about the facts of the case to you. But you hear that a witness says a car came up and it was a red car. And then you seem to remember that you read or somebody told you that it was actually a blue car. Which one would you rely on in making your decision in this case if that was an important fact?
Did I read about it here?
No. A witness said there was a red car, and you remember on TV or somewhere in Good Morning America that they said it was a blue car. Somebody said it was a blue car.
Yeah.
Which one would you rely, if that was an important factor, if that was a crucial factor in the case, whether it was a red car or a blue car, which one you rely on? What you heard in this courtroom or what you heard on Good Morning America by somebody?
I have to rely on the fact that that person's under oath, and I have to rely that they're telling the truth, so that's what I have to go by.
So I guess my question is, if you're sitting as a juror and you listen to the testimony of a witness, and then you recall something from having seen on Good Morning America, you understand that that cannot come into the jury room. That cannot come into a court.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you agree with that?
I agree.
Can you agree that you can only make a decision on what happens in the courtroom?
Yes.
Okay. So when you listen to the evidence, sometimes, remember certain things as a result of something happening. You agree that you cannot bring that into the courtroom?
Yep. I understand that there's a process of what evidence we're allowed to see, and that's what I have to make my decision on.
So anything that you may have heard on Good Morning America or watched on Good Morning America, if you remember it, you can't bring it in, or can you tell other jurors, oh, by the way, at Good Morning America, I heard this, and even though even though it's not coming in, we still, that's important.
That's correct.
You agree?
I agree.
How about if one of the jurors approached you while you're there deliberating and said, hey, I saw on CNN this thing? What would you tell that juror in terms of whether you could consider that or not?
We can't talk about that, and at that point, we'd probably have to say something.
Okay. Have you served on a jury before?
No.
Okay. You just have a knowledge of the way the system works, I gather?
Yeah, and I work for a good company. It's fair.
I'm sorry?
And I work for a good company. It's fair, and we talk about the rules and
Good.
the way it is.
And finally, ma'am, I gather you don't have an issue in terms of conflicts, insurmountable conflicts, from work or family or anything like that. Is that correct?
No, my only concern would be safety. That's my only concern.
You understand that the courts have that under control in terms of the deputies here in Seminole County, and they're going to ensure that will be treated. Do you have any concern other than that?
No, I have to trust that.
Okay. How do I have a moment, Your Honor? You mentioned protests. Did you think that was one group, or was it a bunch of groups related to the protest? Did you think that was one-sided one way or the other?
I'm not sure if it was just different individuals and perhaps some of the family members.
Sure. Okay. Did you think that was a bad thing?
No, I think everyone has a right to their opinion.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. O'Meara.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
A couple of questions. What this initial part right now, as you probably figured out, is just to find out what you know about the case before you sit as a juror.
Yes, sir.
Most cases, we don't have to ask anybody that, because most cases don't get the type of publicity this one has. So there was some other case, the courtroom next door, I think they're picking a jury. Probably just sit down and get started. But we need to make sure that, not that you knew nothing about it, because it's almost impossible, but that we can identify what it is. Because I think once you speak it, then it's out in the open and we can address it, okay? So that's going to be the basis for my questions. And if I prompt something that you want to tell us that I haven't quite asked you about, or if any questions of mine prompt something in response to a question that Mr. Del Rionda suggested, please just let us know, because this is the only opportunity that we really have to talk to you about that issue, okay? You had said that Good Morning America is sort of your go-to news program?
Not go to, it's just what I watch in the mornings.
Okay. And do you go to any other news programs particularly to get news information?
CNN usually.
Okay. So GM, Good Morning America, is that ABC?
ABC.
Have you ever watched other news networks like Fox or MSNBC or any of those?
I've watched Fox sometimes.
Are you aware of whether or not different news organizations or channels have a certain take on the news?
Yes, that's why I watch Fox sometimes.
Okay.
CNN, Fox.
Because they have a certain perspective or take on the news?
It seems that way.
Okay. Would you agree that some other ones do as well?
Mm-hmm.
Having that awareness that they do, does that assist you in filtering through the information you get from those different stations?
Definitely.
Okay. So that you need to sort of look at it through that filter?
I just know a lot of things can be misconstrued, and you kind of just have to take it at face value. And I mean, I think it depends what you're listening about, what truth there is to it.
Okay.
Just always have that questioning attitude.
And did you get much of your information, if any, about this case from local media?
No. I mean, I've seen you, I've seen Mr. Zimmerman when they first brought it out. Not much more than just highlights sometimes.
Okay. And I should thank you for not having a opinion about my face, and also for not remembering a word of what I said. So,
I'm sorry, could you repeat
I
that?
should thank you for not remembering a word about what I said. So.
Well, I remember you were going to represent Mr. Zimmerman, and that was
Way in the beginning?
in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. And just to follow up on what Mr. Delrionda asked you, do you remember anything specific about what I had talked about when you watched me?
Not other than you were representing Mr.
Okay.
Zimmerman.
Should something else come to mind that brings back to your mind that a word or a sentence that I said, you understand that anything that I might say, be it before this case or even in the case itself, is not evidence. And the only time it should be considered by you is we have things called closing arguments, and we're allowed to give you our insight, but even that's not evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So that should that come back up if you're sitting with the other jurors and you remember something that I've said, or for that matter, something that the Martin family representatives have said, that you just focus on what's in the courtroom?
Yes, I can.
Okay. You are on Facebook?
Yes.
Is that a place where you look to for some news or comments as well?
Comments sometimes, but not for my...
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that Facebook has sort of there are different inputs to Facebook. There are those friends that you have,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there's also a part of Facebook called the news feed where you can sort of get more generalized news information.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to also ask you if you would, I can tell what you're saying when you give an indication with your head that it's a yes or no,
Yes or no.
but the woman just in front of you has to take down the yes or no's as you say them. So if you would, I appreciate it.
No problem.
So give me just some idea, whatever you remember hearing about this case from that side of Facebook, the news feed side of Facebook.
The Facebook, I don't remember. I don't think I remember anything from Facebook about
Okay.
the case.
Would you go to that part of Facebook to actually get any of your information, or no?
The only times I've ever gotten any information from Facebook in general would if they have a link to an article, is
Right.
usually.
Okay, and have you done any of that linking through the news feed to an article concerning this case?
No.
Let's talk now then about the friends part of Facebook, where you can interact, and I think you even said get some comments.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, if you can, any of the comments or interaction that you've had with friends on Facebook, the category friends, about this case.
No. I'm pretty sure I haven't had anything related to this case on my news feed or in conversations or anything on Facebook.
Okay, so is it then your memory today that this has not been a topic of conversation amongst your Facebook friends?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Similarly, if you do remember something that you read from Facebook or from a friend of yours, would you agree that that needs to be kept outside the courtroom and not be considered?
Yes, sir.
And just to follow that through, if you're sitting in the back of say you're selected and case is over, you're doing what jurors do, deliberate to make a decision on the case, and something comes to your mind about something you heard outside the courtroom, how do you handle that?
I don't believe I can bring that in. I know I can't bring it in. And if I have questions to, perhaps if I heard it out there or if I heard it here, that might be something that I might just bring up to you or whoever I'm allowed to ask, if there was some sort of confusion for some reason.
Pretty clear, though, that nothing outside the courtroom can attend to your deliberations of what you heard inside the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if another juror suggested something that was from a previous experience they had
Mm-hmm.
and talked to you about it in the jury room, how would you handle that?
You have to stop them and tell them you can't talk about that. And I think it's pretty fair that we would have to bring that up.
Okay. Great. And the judge will give you some instructions, particularly on those issues. So we're talking about it real generally here. Judge Nelson will give you some very specific instructions as to what is appropriate and not appropriate for deliberations. Would you would follow those, I presume?
Yes, I think that would help also.
Okay. You had talked, anything else that you have seen through Facebook about this case that we haven't talked about, either in response to Mr. Delrionda's questions or mine?
I don't believe so.
No. Any other sources of information flow into you besides GMA, Fox News and CNN, some of those ones you watch on occasion, and whatever you may have gotten through Facebook?
No, just like I said, conversation with my mom before, where we were just interested to see what's going to happen and that it's coming up soon.
What did your mom think about this?
I don't think she really had much of an opinion either.
Okay. Are you a churchgoer?
Yes.
Any conversations that you've had with members of your church?
No.
Has it ever been a topic of conversation, either for sermons or support petitions or anything like that, one
No.
side or the other?
No.
And how about just your social group of friends, those people that you would just hang out with or have dinner with or go to a movie, or any interaction regarding this case?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that, okay? Tell me, you don't need to name names, but I'd like to know the connection. Are these basically social friends?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me of those conversations.
Very similar to the ones that I had with my mother, that the case was coming up, and we're mainly local or all in Florida, and that it was just coming up, basically.
Okay. Anything about what I would define as the substance of the case, the evidence or the testimony or hearings that have been held, anything like that?
No.
Okay. Have you been paying any attention in the past few weeks, particularly since you got your jury summons, paying any more attention about this case?
No.
There have been some ongoing court proceedings. And again, because of the nature of the publicity surrounding this case, they have been publicized, televised. Have you seen any of the court proceedings in this case?
No.
You said that you had noticed early on that there was a website created by Mr. Zimmerman seeking funds, and that you thought that was unique, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sorry.
And unique in a good way, interesting, unique in a bad way. You think it was inappropriate to ask other people for money to help them out, or any further insight on that?
No, I didn't think it was inappropriate. I don't think it was good. I thought it was different than I don't ever think I've ever seen a defendant ever ask for money in the past, and I just thought it was different,
Okay.
unique.
Anything about that would give you cause for concern,
No.
so that you wouldn't lead for or against Mrs. Zimmerman because of that fact?
No.
And could have asked, since you didn't find out about that in the courtroom, not even consider that when deliberating?
No. I would not consider that as deliberating.
Okay, thanks. Do you think that the coverage of this case has been slanted any which way?
I'm sure it has. I just think it depends who's talking at the time.
Okay.
I'm sure it has.
How has that sort of sat with you, the fact that you're getting some of this information, but in a way that you believe it to be somewhat slanted? How do you handle that?
I think it's normal for the media to do that. Same thing with politics.
Same thing with politics?
Yes, and the media. It's always slanted from one way or another, or not always, but.
Okay. We talked a little while ago about then having to sort of filter it because of that. Do you think that you're capable, with the media impact on you, to sort of filter it properly to get what you believe to be accurate information?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. Do you feel comfortable enough that you've been able to filter the media information that you've been exposed to to get, as best you can, more accurate information.
Yes.
You also mentioned that you were concerned about that race was being brought into this. And I want to just drill into that a little bit more. First of all, where did you get that from?
I think it was Good Morning America.
And tell me about what was said that gave you the indication that this was becoming a racial event.
I really don't remember any details on exactly what was said. I just remember the protest and the backing of that reverend. And I think there was even an organization that was perhaps starting to look into if it might have been a racial issue, I think.
Okay.
It's been a while.
The reverend you're speaking of, is that Reverend Al Sharpton?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what I can't remember.
That's okay. And did you actually see him speak about this?
Here?
Just on TV or
Just on Good Morning America when they flashed his picture, but not what he was saying.
anything substantive that you remember him saying?
No, really, the only reason I would have to think it was more of a racial was really just kind of what the news was saying, a little bit of what they thought. So I have to take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. To the extent that race doesn't come into the evidence here at this case, are you going to bring, from your own experience or from your media exposure, are you going to bring any racial component to this if you sit as a juror?
I will not.
And I think Mr. De Leon asked you, so let me be a bit more specific. Do you think protesters have the right to protest if they want to?
They do.
Would that impact at all on you if we didn't even hear about protesting from that witness stand? Would that be any concern that you didn't hear about it?
No.
You think Reverend Sharpton has the right to his opinion in regard to how he perceives this event?
Yes, everyone does.
Any concern about that?
No.
I do want to talk to you about your last concern that you mentioned for a moment, and that is you mentioned the word safety. And I just want to know, do you have a concern for your safety here, as you sit here today?
I hope not.
Okay.
No, I just, like you said, this is highly publicized, and that's the only concern I would have.
Okay. Does that can only come from the information that you found out about this case to date from the media and talking to people? Would that be accurate?
Not from this case, from another case. And that might have been brought upon by the witness or the jurors themselves speaking to the media.
So you have some experience with some other case where there were concerns with how the jurors were being treated? Is that, I don't want to...
No, I also on Good Morning America with another case,
Okay.
another place. I just remember those jurors were speaking to the media, and then after that, from what I understood, is that they felt threatened after that. They were getting death threats and things like that. And I think that just came from it being also a highly publicized case, and that's why that would be my only concern here as well.
Understood. Though it's not particular to pretrial publicity, I'd like just a couple more questions with this witness, if I might, Your Honor. Sure.
Any objection?
Thank you.
Any objections?
No, but,
I know how to limit it.
and also, we're not getting into, okay. No objection in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, this is a publicized case, as you now know. And the judge has the system has many provisions to keep jurors safe and protected. And in this case, even more than others, there are good safety measures in place. I just want to make sure that you don't have any experience in your background and just the knowledge of another case, which would cause your focus to be on your safety rather than on the trial. So can you agree with us if I ask you to agree to just be able to focus on the events that happened in the courtroom and not be worried about safety, which is otherwise assured by the court?
Yes, I can, and if I ever had any issue, I would bring that up.
Okay.
You know, just as I've mentioned it today,
Sure.
you know, I would bring it up if I felt otherwise.
Great.
So I have to trust that.
Great. Last question. We've talked for a few minutes. Is there anything now that has come up in our conversation that you think, regarding specific to the pretrial publicity, that we haven't talked about? Anything that's come back to mind that you'd like to put on the table to tell us that you remember, or anything else that may you have sort of gleaned from the media that we haven't talked about?
No.
Great. Because from this point forward, if you remember it, you cannot let it impact on your decision-making process. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
And you can't let other jurors do it either. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
No further questions, then.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated for just a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, approach the bench. Thank you very much, ma'am. If you'll please follow Deputy Jarvis. And we're going to break for lunch until 1 o'clock. Court is in recess.